So good afternoon, everyone. What a great day. I'm Audrey Russo. I run the Pittsburgh Technology Council. Very thrilled to be here. And along with Marie Pelloni, I'd like the spotlight shined on her for a moment. She is really the maestro behind the scenes, making sure we do the work that we're doing as it relates to talent, whether it relates to young people, whether it relates to new programs that we are building. She is our person. And on top of that, if you don't know her and a little bit about her background, she actually is our on-staff teacher because she comes out of the education system where the rest of us come out of lots of different worlds, myself out of tech, and certainly have never been a good teacher. So Marie has just been an amazing asset to us. And if you want to get in touch with her at any time, she can put her info out there for you. But I just wanted to shine the light on her because we are all learning about lots of things right now, all of us. And that's what I'm very excited about today, because today is just another opportunity to talk about sharing and learning because we're really in this together. So today, I'm welcoming everyone to Winning Talent Together, the remote work revolution, which is, by the way, something I grapple with each and every day, both through our membership as well as personally and professionally. So I'm very thrilled to be able to listen to the conversation from the wisdom of the people that are on our panel today, as well as our moderator. So I want to thank our sponsors, Academy Pittsburgh. I gave you a big shout out on our business as usual earlier. We're very excited to partner with you guys and gals. You're doing pretty amazing work. So I see that Ryan is here. He just waved his hand or he did a dance. I'm not exactly sure. Okay. So thank you. And if you don't know them, we'll make sure that you get links to their work because they're really doing technology boot camps and doing a lot of amazing work up in Allentown against all odds. So really appreciate that. And then Synergy Staffing, our longtime friends for really a long time in terms of staffing and placement. Who's here from Synergy, Marie? Because I'm not seeing like the whole checkerboard.
I don't think anyone is on here today from Synergy.
Okay, that's fine. And CGI, if you don't know anything about CGI, you really should. They have over 400 people in Pittsburgh. They are one of the largest IT organizations in terms of consulting in I think in North America, if not beyond. And Bernie Mongilio, who's here from CGI?
We have Will on our...
Okay, Taylor said Frank Civitati is on. And he is from Synergy. So thank you, Frank, for always being such a good partner, as well as CGI. We just actually appointed Bernie Mongilio to be on the board of the Pittsburgh Tech Council. So I'm pretty excited about that as well. So now I'm going to shut up after this. Okay, this is my intro to today's moderator. And I think you will be thrilled with his style of moderation, as well as his background. He's got, he is president of Citrin Consulting, and he is a consultant. He does work internationally. He is a leadership coach. He's an organizational psychologist, so he can read you even when you don't think that he's reading you. He can really read you. I know that about him. So he's very intuitive, and he definitely puts things together about people pretty quickly. And he has just worked in terms of transformation for so many companies across the US and internationally. He's based in Pittsburgh, although right now he's joining us from Atlanta. His work focuses on practical skill-based actions that leaders can take in real time to affect, the business challenges. Today is obviously the topic is definitely one, and I'm sure that it's keeping Richard busy. He is, the challenges that HR teams face during the pandemic, not just necessarily the topic today, and facing teams and facing leadership make him just a really perfect person to lead this conversation today. So he works across many, many market sectors. I don't think there's one that you can imagine that he hasn't touched. So education, tech, startups, family businesses, educational institutions, etc. He is also the author, as though he doesn't have enough time, he's the author of 3 books. that I recommend. They're all terrific. Strategy-driven leadership, the playbook for developing your next generation of leaders, the resilience advantage, and how to get a job in whatever town you're living in. But I'm going to pass the baton to Richard, but he's really a special kind of guy that actually really deeply cares about people and leaders. And he is persistent yet kind. And I think that you will feel that in the way that he moderates today. He's been a good friend to the Tech Council and to myself. So I am going to be quiet because I know it's an amazing panel, and Richard will be better at this than I am. So thank you, Richard. Thanks for taking the time while you're on the road. I don't know, are you in a Winnebago on the road?
No, Audrey, we looked at Winnebagos, but we haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. So we need to go, next year we'll go to the RV show and we'll see exactly what the options are for that.
I knew it. I knew it. So I'm going to put myself on mute. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Marie.
Audrey, thank you for that welcome. And thanks to the Pittsburgh Technology Council and the sponsors of this program for bringing us all together today. Also want to do another shout out for Marie Pelloni, Taylor Bombowski, and Ashli Steckel for putting this program together from the Tech Council. We've been working and preparing for this, and we are ready to go. And Marie will be monitoring your chat questions. So as Audrey said, please put them in the chat box. We'll be posing them to the panel as we work through the session, as well as towards the conclusion. We'll spend about 30 or 35 minutes talking with our panel. We'll have Q&A time after that, and then we'll have a networking session at around 2:15. We'd invite you to stay and meet up with your colleagues in breakout rooms and have some more discussion about some of your ideas about remote workplace. But let me begin by introducing our amazing panel. First up, I have William LaBar. Will is CGI's Vice President in charge of the U.S. Delivery Center Program, a network of 8 centers of excellence across the U.S. that employ over 1,700 IT professionals and leverage public-private partnerships with local communities and universities. In his role at CGI, Will is also the executive sponsor of CGI's US-wide STEM at CGI program, which is focused on inspiring and mentoring students in demographics that are underrepresented in STEM fields, and we all know how necessary and important that work is. With the majority of his career, though, working as a telecommuter, dating back to 2000, so he's been doing this for 20 years, and a role focused on building distributed teams across CGI's US centers. Will brings a practical experience as well as kind of an expert knowledge base around many of the questions we'll be discussing today. So Will, thanks for joining us. Next up is Ashli White. Ashli is the Global Summer Analyst Program Manager at BNY Mellon. In this role, she oversees the Enterprise Internship Program in the US, UK, and in Ireland, France, and Poland. So she, I'm sure, is getting out and about as well when things clear up. In her spare time, she loves to share her passion for professional development by volunteering for organizations such as PA Women Work and Literacy Pittsburgh. I've done work with Literacy Pittsburgh as well. Ashli, it's a tremendous organization. She's also an active member of Vibrant Pittsburgh's Next Gen Council, a group of diverse young professionals who aim to drive inclusion and equity in our city. And her remote work statement is that remote work is the office of the future. Love that, Ashli. We'll look forward to hearing more about that as we go forward. Eric Schmuck is the software technical leader at Philips in the sleep and respiratory care group. That's a big group located out in Murraysville, but they're moving over to Bakery Square in a new building. If you're over in Bakery Square, you'll see the new Philips building over there. And they're going to be, I think, interested in seeing how they work on that. Eric has been at Philips for over almost 10 years. His current role focuses on program quality initiatives, including hiring excellence and onboard training. Eric's technical expertise is mainly in Java development and software engineering processes. He's worked extensively on the enterprise software that enables doctors and clinicians to remotely monitor respiratory patients who are using Philips devices to treat conditions such as sleep apnea, COPD, and COVID-19. Philips, as you know, is a major player this past year with their respiratory devices. Eric holds an MBA from the University of Illinois and a master's in IT from Carnegie Mellon. And I might share that Eric's Fighting Illini are a top seed in the NCAA basketball tournament, what's known as March Madness. And if my research is correct, Eric, that has not happened since 2005. So good luck to your NBA alma mater and everyone else's alma mater who's in March Madness. Welcome, Eric. We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Next up is Mandy McManus. Mandy is the manager of HR Business Partners at Sheetz, supporting the non-store side of the business from HR and employee relations standpoint. We all know Sheetz. We all love Sheetz. Mandy has 16 years of HR experience in healthcare, manufacturing, and retail organization. And currently she is focused on planning for the future of work and has learned that working remotely for the last year will have an impact on what employees will expect of workplaces in the future. As Audrey shared, I've been on the road this past week, and I can tell you on my way out and my way back from our road trip, there's nothing more comforting than seeing a Sheetz Wayfarer sign on the highway, knowing that there's an MTO in my future. So thank you, Mandy, for that.
Thank you.
And our last panelist, and certainly not least, is Jim Hullinger. Jim is Senior Vice President and Senior Director of Talent Acquisition for the PNC Financial Services Group, with overall responsibility for planning and execution of the firm-wide staffing and recruitment strategy. Jim has over 24 years of experience in talent acquisition, leading national recruitment organizations across financial services, tech, legal, sales, and professional services industry. He's an expert also at aligning talent acquisition models with business strategies to enable business growth while achieving cost efficiency. Such an important component to make that HR talent piece align with the business strategy. So good on you, Jim. He's a graduate of Purdue University with a Bachelor of Science degree. Jim, glad to have you with us. So with that, boy, that's a mouthful already. Thank you, panel. This is going to be very exciting. Let me just set the stage by talking about a recent McKinsey report entitled What's Next for Remote Work, in which they conclude that up to 20% of the workforce could work remotely from home for several days per week, which would mean that would be 3 to 4 times more employees working in this style than before the pandemic. You know, remote work has been around since the 1970s, but has never reached a tipping point as it has under the guise of the pandemic. The implications are enormous, not just for the workforce, but for issues such as diversity and inclusion, urban usage, and even how we consider finding the balance between those who are able to work from home, like software developers, versus those who are able to not work from home, such as retail workers at Sheetz. How do we find that balance? So we're going to be covering that and a lot more, but let's begin by asking our panelists a straightforward question. And I might start with Mandy on this. Can you talk a little bit, Mandy, about the future of the work setting for Sheetz, and particularly in relation to remote work?
Absolutely. So obviously Sheetz has about 21,000 employees, the majority of them being retail workers. So as you're aware, when you have frontline workers, they're essential and don't really have the option to be remote workers. But we still have a whole group, several thousand in our operation support teams that really, we never really had a focus on remote work in the past, but since the pandemic, which has been about a year now, we have at least 800 employees that have been fully remote for the last year. And so things that we were resistant to in the past, we've proven that we can do, and we can do it well, and we're still seeing results. So what we're trying to do is figure out, well, what does that look like for us in the future? So we did survey our staff, our VPs and directors, and really looked at, who can work from home permanently, who maybe has a workforce that can work hybridly. And what we really found based on our research was the majority of our folks feel like a hybrid model would be ideal, where they kind of get the best of both worlds. But there's also some technology positions that could be fully remote. So what we're looking to do is really, what does our office building look like today, and what will it look like in the future? So we're actually talking about hotel spaces, setting up workstations rather than offices where people can go and connect. But also that leads to a whole discussion on technologies as well. People not using their cell phones. How do we get calls to come out maybe from a cell phone that looks like it's from the office and get that to work? Do we have enough security? and connectivity, so we're not seeing those issues. Also, a lot of our web-based tools, WebEx, Zoom, a lot of people didn't really understand that at first. So making sure that we have those trainings in place to really make sure that we're successful moving forward. And interestingly enough, I just read an article this morning that said 47% of employees will leave for another position if they can work hybridly or some form of remote if their employer isn't going to offer it. So that's scary. So I think what it really speaks loudly to me is we need to come up with a way to make this work and make it successful if we want to be successful in retaining and engaging our talent in the future.
Great. Thank you, Mandy. Will, what are you guys seeing over at CGI?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me here. It's an honor to be part of this panel. Our workforce is really diverse too. We have about 76,000 people around the world with all different types of roles. So we have the software developers who can maybe do a lot of their work from home, but we also do work for clients that require secure on-site manipulation of their data and the systems. And so during the course of the pandemic, we've had some of our workforce be on site the entire time, and some of our workforce, the majority of it, working from home from day one. So it's a pretty seamless transition. Our culture as a company is, focused on a couple things. One is proximity to our clients, like we have in Pittsburgh, and then also a spirit of working together. So the culture of our company does entail a lot of that working together as a group. However, we've always historically had a culture that embraces a hybrid working model. And so what I think we're going to see moving forward is sort of that blending of that working together in a hybrid working model, so that we're providing the type of work environment that's, one, competitive in the industry. It's responsive to the different needs of our members. We call our employees members. So if you hear me say that a couple of times here, that's what that means. And so I think it's really going to be about embracing that level of flexibility while still holding true to some of the core tenets of our culture. And everything that Mandy mentioned around the things that need to be figured out are the discussions we're having as an organization, ranging from appropriate security to the right tooling to the right training. And I would maybe add, in addition to the training, and we'll probably talk about this later, but training around the skill sets of managers and team members that are not necessarily on how to use the tools, but how to interact with people and how to lead teams in a way that builds trust in an environment where not everyone is in the same place all the time, and not everyone's on an even playing field, essentially. So,
Great point. Thank you. Let's make sure we come back to that. Eric, what about Philips? How are you guys approaching this remote work?
Well, we always had a pretty robust work from home policy. Software developers had the option to work from home 2 days a week before the pandemic. So you would see maybe 60% of the software developers in the building. Now, once the pandemic hit and software developers were asked to go home and work from home, that transition was actually fairly easy for the organization, because everybody already had a laptop computer, everybody had the Zoom capabilities to be able to do remote team meetings. One of the challenges we had at Philips, we're the manufacturer of ventilators. So we saw a tremendous surge in a need for our products. So we have manufacturing people who are biomechanical engineers, people who are electrical engineers, who couldn't go home. They had to be on site. They had to be manning they had to be working in the assembly lines. They had to be able to address the new staffing needs. We were hiring very quickly to add to our physical ability to deliver our products. But software people had a large need as well, because the hardware and the software at Philips, they go together. We can't deliver a new physical ventilator without having the software that complements it. So the big problem we had in the past year was, how do we find the people we need? How do we hire the people we need? And we found that we went through this hiring surge. Almost half of our hires last year were outside the Pittsburgh region. And we were okay with that at the time, because we said that, well, we have this burning need. I mean, the COVID-19 pandemic for Philips was kind of that generational moment where we said, this is our time. This is when we're needed. This is a call to arms for us, the same way, you could, not to the same scale, but like, Pearl Harbor kind of a moment where we said, this is our fight. We have to deliver. But now we're looking toward this return to office. And as you mentioned, we're moving our offices from the edge of the city in Murraysville and Monroeville into Bakery Square. And we've invested heavily in what we're calling the Center of Excellence. So we anticipate a return to office, but we're still struggling with what exactly does that return to office look like? Prior to the pandemic, we were assumed we were a Pittsburgh-based organization, but now with almost half of our remote hires in the past year, are we more geographically diverse than that? Certainly, we invested a lot of money in the new building, so we're going to be locating there, but are we going to try to cap our remote hiring? Are we going to be a Pittsburgh-based organization? Are we going to be geographically diverse? And what does that mean for employee equity? You know, some people have long commutes and they're Pittsburgh-based. How is that fair to folks who are maybe in Philadelphia and they don't have to drive into the office every day? So we're struggling with a lot of those questions. We don't really know exactly what the future holds for us. We know that we're going to move into the new building, and we're looking for that balance. I think I have more questions than answers, certainly.
It sounds like it so far. Ashli, how about, thanks, Eric, that's great. Ashli, how about at BNY Mellon? What are you folks seeing? And from your global perspective, what are you seeing outside of the US, even if you have some sense of that?
Yeah, so again, thank you, Richard, for moderating this discussion. And I'm so excited to be here. This is such a timely and important topic. So at BNY Mellon, I think I don't want to echo any of the sentiments of the other panelists, but I wanted to focus on especially the global organization, working across cultures and being able to acknowledge the difficulties that the pandemic has brought on in different communities. For example, we had many Indian associates who they have multi-generations in the home. So whenever they were asked to, be 100% remote, they're living with 6, 7, 8 people trying to find a quiet space in their home so they can work for 8 hours. Often our APAC associates are working upwards of 12 and 13 hours because although we're global, it's still, for better and for worse, a Western-centric model. So, they're working crazy hours for us and just trying to find, can we help create like a safe space for you so you can like focus on your work? So that was one challenge that we faced. Additionally, there has been, and I think we'll get into this a little bit later, just the uptick in EAP, request for EAP resources, needing to, take leaves, medical leaves, these types of searches that came up, which really, I think it forced all of us to kind of take the perspective of an organization is a group of people who are, at the end of the day, if your people aren't at their best self, they're not bringing their best self to work. So I think that the pandemic, more than anything, was kind of a reset for all of us, just to focus on the people element of our organizations and how we can best serve them and how we can acknowledge what their personal struggles are and mitigate those and do the best we can to support them so that they can bring their best selves to work.
Great. Thank you, Ashli. Kind of making notes here. We've got some follow-up questions related to training, related to equity, related to self-care and mental health, which has become a very big issue during this time. Jim, what are you seeing over at PNC?
Yeah, it's interesting. First, thank you for having me and certainly for moderating this session. Today actually marks the 1-year anniversary where PNC shifted some 32,000 employees to being 100% remote. This is a cultural shift for a large financial services institution like PNC. We had to wrestle with the fact that you have 17,000 frontline employees. We want to make sure we created an environment of eliminating the haves and have-nots, right? We had to put people on the front lines to continue offering those products and services to people who needed to get money, fund a loan and things like that. So we're going through a pretty significant cultural evaluation right now. We've realized over this past year, one, we have the technology to support a remote workforce and a very large remote workforce. We have jobs today that have proven to produce better outcomes being remote than maybe they had in the offices, combining the commute time childcare, elder care, things like that. So we have a lot to consider as we have evaluated. And Richard, I know we're gonna dive into some areas of redistribution of talent, and that was another takeaway for us. But I think, like many of us, we're a Pittsburgh-based organization. I don't anticipate, that return to work to be radically different than it was pre-pandemic, but I do think it will be different. The benefit that we have today that we didn't have was the announcement of our acquisition of BBVA USA. We're now a coast-to-coast organization, or we will be soon, shortly following regulatory approval. And that's opened our eyes to different marketplaces in terms of tapping different pools of talent, not necessarily drawing people to Pittsburgh in every instance. And then certainly coupled with that, having the flexibility or the understanding that, this job can perform remotely more so today than it ever has in the past. So I think there's a lot to consider. I probably, like many of you, have more questions than answers today, but it is an evaluation process that we're undertaking as we speak.
Well, I'm just going to say, panel, that you can't keep asking questions. We're looking to you for some of these answers. So I'll pose it to you right now. And the first theme, I think, that we discussed in our pre-panel discussions that we've had over the past couple of weeks, and I think you've echoed, and interesting was echoed in that McKinsey study that pointed out that there's going to be people who can do remote work, and there are people who will not be able to do remote work. Obviously, industrial workers, people building things, cannot be working remotely. Will mentioned it, Jim alluded to it, Ashli talked about it as well. What do we do about this issue of equity in relationship to the workforce, as opposed to those working from home and those who are forced to come into the office? Is there an approach to find, we already have enough issues around inequality in this country, and the research from McKinsey indicated that it's mostly going to be higher paid knowledge workers who are going to be able to work from home, and lower paid technical workers who are going to be coming into the workplace. And I know we don't have any industrial, well, I guess perhaps Phillips builds things, and certainly Sheetz delivers things. And is there any sense of how your organization is thinking about this, or is that on the radar yet, or are we just too early for it? And Will, why don't I kick that off with you? I know that was a question you've raised earlier, and it'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on it.
I think the topic of inequity has a lot of different dimensions to it, actually. And I'm thinking about it maybe from the perspective of a hybrid workforce that's in a knowledge sector like IT, right? And so there's certainly, since we're looking at a hybrid model, we'll have less of a challenge from a perspective of people who are permanently remote versus people who are always in the office, which can create some inequities, even if they're doing the same type of work, because there's a lot of concerns around, how does career progression look different between those different segments and cohorts, right? In a hybrid situation, to me, I think that's where you're going to find inequities around who has the option of the flexibility of coming in X days a week, and who does not for various reasons, or who always has to work from home because of certain personal situations. And I guess to me, one of the things that we need to remember when we're looking at that and how to deal with it is not necessarily a tactical, silver bullet solution, but it's more of a philosophical, bringing empathy into how we design our workforce models moving forward. And what's encouraging to me about that is all throughout 2020, most of us experienced what it was like to work from home. And so as we shift to this model where everyone's in different modalities of work, we understand what it's like to be in those different places. And so I think organizations like us, we need to continue to flex those muscles over time and not forget what we learned in 2020, and bring that empathy into how we build the systems and processes that support our workforce moving forward. And so I think that fundamental tenet to me is something that is critical in starting to address some of the inequities that are, that we're about to face in that kind of hybrid sort of situation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Mandy, what about at Sheetz? So Sheetz is pretty obvious. Your retail workers are not going to be working remotely, or are they going to be working? Is there some model for doing that? What are you guys thinking about that, and how do you find that balance?
Yeah, unfortunately, there really isn't an option for our frontline workers. So we think about that a lot. And Richard, you're probably familiar with Sheetz. We survey our employees quite frequently, and we're extremely focused on engagement, what's driving the engagement, where our opportunities are. So every single year we're focused on engagement and really getting employee feedback. We also have the ability to do some pulse surveys, which we absolutely did throughout the whole pandemic. I'll say with the focus on engagement, we really focus on good and timely communication and making sure that it's accessible at all levels of the organization. And so that way everybody's getting the same information at the same time. So we do have an intranet. We do weekly updates. We, over the course of the pandemic, created a COVID resource page so that everybody can find it. It's in the same place. They can access it on their mobile phone. So really making sure that everybody's getting the same information. People know what's going on. In fact, we probably over communicated, but I don't think that hurt us in any way. Some of the other things to try to avoid inequities, I mean, not only do we want an engaged workforce, but we want an inclusive workforce. And we really, just bringing up the topic of empathy, empathize with those who had to come to work. So we did some bonuses. We called it wow pay at first, where you gave an extra $1 or so per hour for a period of time. But then as the pandemic kept going, because I think we all thought it was going to be about 2 weeks, we actually did some retention bonuses where it was the same criteria. So if you were employed from this time to this time and you were a frontline worker, where the remote workers weren't eligible for those things, they would be eligible for a retention bonus. Also gave some extra paid time off, some vacation time earned for those working the front lines. Also for those that were at home, we implemented virtual happy hours, collaboration meetings, activities. We actually played games and gave prizes to really get our folks engaged, to make sure that everybody felt like they were still part of the team, regardless of where they were working.
Great. Well, I want to piggyback on your response, Mandy, which is, I think, terrific, to ask a question that was posed to me by one of my clients who recently took a new position where he's picking up a remote team in California. And I think this piggybacks on this question we've just been answering, that you and Will have been answering, which is, what do you do to engage and motivate your remote workforces? What's the strategy for doing that? Jim, do you have any sense of how to motivate and engage your remote employees? I don't know if my client is listening today, but I can convey it to him.
Well, I had the benefit going into the pandemic to having a geographically dispersed team across the country. About almost half of which was already 100% remote. But shifting the other half to 100% remote certainly changed the way in which we do it. And I think Mandy touched on a number of things. One, the use of video conferencing versus just a Skype audio meeting certainly became prevalent. We hosted biweekly COVID updates across our entire talent organization. So our teams, not just talent acquisition, but the entire talent organization, can hear updates not only from senior leaders, but other executives in the organization. Virtual happy hours, employee appreciation days where you're executing games and having fun. We've begun virtual offsites this year in light of what we feel is going to be another extended period of time. So it does shift in which the way you manage teams. You do miss that collaboration in person. You do miss that, but there are means to achieve it, certainly in a virtual environment. And that includes, expanding tools and resources like WebEx or Zoom. We launched an expanded Hire View, which is an interviewing technology that you can do video interfacing so that we could continue to hire and onboard individuals as we come through the pandemic. So there's a number of ways to do it. It's different, but you have to be aggressive with it. And it certainly accelerated our calendar in doing so.
Great. Ashli, how about at BNY? What are you thinking about in relationship to what have you seen people do in terms of engaging and motivating teams? And also, let's piggyback on that on a question that you raised earlier around wellness and self-care. Is there a connection between those? And what's been your approach and what have you been seeing?
Absolutely. So the component of what I said previously of, this kind of making us all realize that we're all humans in an organization, isolation is not good for anyone. So for those who, as was previously stated, we thought it was going to be 2 weeks or a month, and here we are a year, working from home. It does take a toll on many, emotionally, physically, et cetera. To address your first question, I think that the engagement piece has really been an opportunity for our business resource groups to shine. We have six BRGs at my current organization, and each of them have been putting out phenomenal content, from soft skill training around implicit bias and how to be a better ally in the LGBTQ community, to some more hard skill things. Like we had a really great design thinking workshop a few weeks ago, a lot of programming around artificial intelligence, machine learning, just getting those of us on the business side and business partner side up to par with what's going on in the industry. And because everyone's at home, you're getting to, easily interact with your coworker in Singapore that before, you have your team who's, right here in Pittsburgh. You may not make that extra effort to engage with them as regularly as this virtual environment has given us the opportunity to. So I think it's really just opened up the door to drive more networking opportunities, more engagement across regional teams that are in different regions or regionally dispersed. They're able to better connect, I think, with our coworkers who are across the country or across the world. And it's really just been, at least from my perspective, a really great opportunity to connect with them. On the self-care piece, I will say that BNY Mellon has done a tremendous job in addressing the mental and physical kind of drain that can come from, just what the pandemic, call it what it is, like coronavirus, no one was ready for it. We talk about business continuity and resiliency. Well, Corona was like, what do those models really look like? So it kind of like shook us all to our core of like, how resilient are our people? And I think probably 1 or 2 months in is when we really started to see specifically our wellness and benefits team doing some tremendous work in that space to ensure that our associates were doing well. A few of the initiatives, we partnered with a vendor, Mequilibrium, which is pretty much like a self-care dashboard where, you'll get alerts every day in your email. Did you take a walk? Did you go outside? Did you get your, X amount ounces of water? If you want to focus on physical, it has, at-home exercises you can do, just a variety of things to encourage self-care and just taking those moments out so you can be the best you. Additionally, again, the business resource groups have been tremendous in offering Mindfulness Monday sessions where, it'll be 15 minutes every Monday, 7:30 a.m., where you get together, you listen to a guided meditation, and it just kind of level sets you for the week where, okay, I'm in a Zen space, like I'm ready to go. My mind is fresh. We also have Yoga Wednesday, where we'll have a virtual yoga instructor come in and just do, mostly beginner level, just yoga poses that you can do at home. Walk and talks have become very popular for team update meetings where, everyone just kind of dials in. There's no clients on, obviously, and we're just, hey, take a walk around the block, get out, move your feet. Those little things, it just has proven to be so transformative in how I think we view work, how we view each other, and knowing that your organization cares enough to put these things in place and to really drive them. I think it actually kind of bolstered commitment to the organization, because it's like, you care about me enough to give me a self-care app and find a yoga instructor who wants to do virtual activities with us. Like it really has driven, I think, engagement tremendously.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. We talked about technology, building community, which I think nobody really identified or talked much about, but that's what your BRGs have been able to do, as well as it sounds like managers being mindful of offering things like the walk and talk, doing the Steve Jobs thing. So that's great. Good, Ashli. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. I know we got a couple of chat messages there. about those as well. You know, Jim raised an issue earlier about value that remote work is bringing, and I actually want to pose this to you, Eric, which is, you know, what skills have you seen that have actually increased the value that remote workers have been bringing to Philips? Can you, you know, if your leaders were asking you, you know, hey, why should we keep remote workers? Why should we keep that model? Eric, would leadership at Philips be able to say, you know, here's 3 or 4 things that remote workers are actually able to do even better, perhaps, than on-site workers, and this is some of the value that remote work brings to our organization. Any sense of that, Eric, that you've seen at Philips or that your colleagues and you are talking about?
Yeah, at Philips, we've always had a belief that we evaluate people on a couple of different dimensions. One is, you know, when we're evaluating software developers, of course, the technical skill is extremely important. Their ability to write the code, ability to understand code, create the products that we need to deliver. But there's another dimension to that, and that is kind of the people, the emotional IQ, the emotional quotient aspect to it. When we hire at Philips, we're not just looking for technical excellence. That's one part of it, but we're also looking for the people who fit into the organization. So if you plot those two things on like a matrix, you can say, you know, who's really good technically, and then who's really good with people. And we try to make sure that we hire people who are extremely high on both dimensions. You can imagine that the rock star programmer, the classic guy who's arrogant and doesn't like people, and your questions are annoying to me. I'm so much smarter than you. You can't understand how much smarter I am. Those people don't last at Philips. They may be technically excellent, but since they can't get along with their teammates, even before the pandemic, we really shied away from hiring those people. We really did not. We said those are not good cultural fits. So when we look at people who are successful at Philips, the employees that we want, they're both technically excellent and they're great communicators. They're great teammates. They're great leaders. So that emotional quotient has really come out in the last year as being extremely important. You know, who are the people who are able to come into the organization, help us deliver, but also move forward in a positive way. Certainly the last year has been very stressful on everybody, but you know, at Philips, we've seen long hours due to the demands of the program, the things we needed to do. Right around this time last year, we had a plan of what we were going to deliver in 2020, and we wadded it up and threw it away and said, okay, forget all of that. Now we have this other pressing need. So at Philips, we really said, well, what's going to allow us to be successful? And we kept coming back to this idea of culture. We want to preserve the culture of the organization. We want to be able to have people who buy into our mission, who are able to understand the needs and deliver on it. And that's equally important to the technical skill.
Thank you. That's great. And I think what you're saying is that, you know, Philips has had an emphasis on this balance between technical and people skills, and the pandemic has even solidified that more, which is great. Well, what about at CGI? What are you seeing in regard to this issue of maybe new skills that the remote work revolution is bringing to your organization?
It's pretty similar to what Eric was describing. I mean, you've got a lot of the hard skills that are on the technology side of our business. And at the core of everything we're doing there, like the need for those and the capabilities of using those hasn't really changed. It's all on the people side of how we interact. And we're a services, you know, oriented firm, right, who's helping to try to bring, you know, digital transformation to our clients. We need, you know, workers who can, you know, not just handle the technology side of things, but handle the people and the analytical and the problem solving side of things. So I just think the pandemic has really kind of, like it's done with everything, accelerated or shined a spotlight on a lot of those softer skills that are so critical. It's the communication side of things is incredibly important when you're dealing with people who are not co-located, especially, you know, more on the written side as well as, you know, and reading visual cues, like, which is why Zoom and all these settings are so cognitively draining, right? Because now we're doing it through a camera. But so I think it's primarily those types of skills. I think the other thing is One of the things that this has really made us focus on when we're looking for talent too is the ability for people to focus, self-starters. Since you don't necessarily always have that. It's kind of like when you go to a gym and you're working out with someone, you're all there together, it helps motivate you. Like the office sometimes brings that a little bit, right? And so the ability to do that in a home setting is another skill I think that the pandemic has really brought to the forefront that we need on our teams.
Great. One of the questions that has come up here, I think, in our discussion relates to training of leaders. And one of the things that I've observed in my work the past year is there are some leaders, particularly younger leaders, who get the remote work easily and they can guide their team, struggling, but getting there. Some of the older leaders who perhaps are not as adept at technology find it to be a bit of a struggle in how to work with their teams. Jim, I'm wondering at PNC, what kind of training things have you put together for your leaders to help guide them in getting the most out of their remote workers?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. In particular, if you think about banking, right? Conservative, old school, more traditional. You have individuals culturally that are just stuck with this notion that you have to be in the office from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. I think that barrier has been broken down. I will say that our university, our training arm of our HR organization has done a good job to provide tools and resources available to senior leaders at the bank to help them bridge this gap. But it is a real gap. And as we evaluate the type of leader you want for the future, that's certainly going to be a factor. I think, to Eric's point earlier, technology has driven a lot of this as such. You've got the advent of artificial intelligence, automation. A lot of that has really forced our hand to look at the people skill side of the talent of the individual. And that's going to become paramount, whether you're in a hybrid environment or 100% remote environment. The people side of it, technology is going to continue to advance much quicker than any one of us. And so the people talent side of it's going to be incredibly important as we evaluate this over time, and then certainly make decisions on who goes back to the office, who stays on the front line, who's hybrid, who's 100% remote. But the resources to senior leaders, to leaders of a certain age group and higher is going to be important as well. And I think we've done fairly well with that.
Great. Mandy, we're all Sheetz freaks, and we're all therefore pretty hip. Any of those kinds of challenges at Sheetz, or has technology and more importantly leader adaptation worked well to make this transition?
Yeah, I will say it was a real struggle at first. We're very fortunate. We have a workforce development team that does develop training in-house. So there's actually a series going on right now. I believe it's an 8-course series for managers on how to effectively manage remote work and all the different things that we have to consider, and being flexible and making sure that you have those one-on-one meetings, that you are on camera, that you're staying engaged, that you have to be very deliberate about the frequency and type of communication that you use, so that everybody feels part of the team. So, and that, not even just that, but learning the technology as well. So we started to create job aids, for just very basic. I mean, we have truck drivers in the field who've never touched technology, and they need to learn how to log into a WebEx for the first time. So really, or using their mobile phone to hop on and just doing that for the first time. So sometimes we have to bring it down to a very basic level. So all those aspects, it's, we weren't ready for it at first, but we're playing catch up now. So.
Great, thank you. Well, let's turn to our audience and hear what some of their questions are. Maria, I know you've been monitoring the chat room and it's been active.
Yes.
You do have some questions for our panel?
We do, and some of them, I think that some of them have been touched on and answered throughout. I want to talk about Ken's question first. If anyone does have actual training that's already been developed, a lot of you talked about the training that you're doing internally, but if anyone does know of training that's already developed to help managers deal with both in-house and a hybrid model of teams working remotely, please throw that in the chat, because that would be a wonderful resource. Craig Pritz asked a great question. Are any of your companies talking about mandating a vaccine for employees that would be coming back to work? Is there any talk around vaccines with your employees?
Marie, I can tell you offhand, it has been discussed at PNC, and it's been decision that there will not be a mandate at the organization.
Marie, I can touch on that as well. We're in the same boat as Jim at PNC. We are not mandating vaccines. However, for those that do get a vaccine, we're offering an incentive. We're also excusing, so we have a lot of attendance policies as well. So we're excusing any points that would be incurred if somebody gets ill from a vaccine or they need to leave. We're encouraging managers to please allow them to go, and just offering an incentive for those who do get it.
Those are both very helpful answers. And to go along with that, it wasn't your full name, so I apologize. AC Woods said, what data or timeline is your company using to talk about when to return to work? Are they looking at COVID current data? Are they looking at percentage vaccinated in a region? What are they using?
Marie, I can jump in real quick, and then I apologize. I do need to jump. I'm running late for my next call. One of the things that we did, we launched a search at the end of March of last year for a chief medical advisor. While we have great networking and connection to the Allegheny Health Network in Pittsburgh, we felt it would be important to align ourselves with a professional that can help provide us guidance and coaching. So he's an individual that's provided down to the market level analysis on what not only the infection rate is, what the death rate is, and then certainly now the percent inoculated in the communities that we live and operate. That will guide much of our decision in terms of how we return to work. We set a date of June 1st as the next kind of salvo to reevaluate how and when we might be returning individuals to work, if that will be in a phased approach, if it will be based on a hybrid model, a rotational model. But we do rely heavily on the guidance of our chief medical advisor to help us understand the data, the analysis down to the local market level, so we can make the best decisions in an effort to keep everybody safe.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks for hanging in there.
Thank you all. It was great to see you all. Take care.
Thank you for coming, Jim.
Eric,
Anyone else have an answer on that? Oh, sorry.
I know with a new building opening, that's probably a discussion point at Phillips. How are you guys approaching a startup date, or is that been decided?
I think it's not been decided. We really don't have a hard and fast rule about it. I think we're expecting a more gradual transition back into the office where people are going to start trickling in at least in the software side. People on the hardware side who have been in the office, they're going to simply make the move. We don't have any policies around it requiring any kind of vaccines. I think at Phillips, we encourage people to get vaccinated. We understand the dangers of the illness and the problems it creates. But we're anxious to get into the building. We're certainly very excited about moving in. The building is spectacular, and the images from inside are amazing. So we're looking forward to that. But I think we're trying to take a very phased, gradual approach. Somebody mentioned before about the idea of hotel seating. Phillips, as a software engineering company, we embraced the open office concept. And that was a really great idea when we had these large open areas. And if you had a question or a problem, you could turn to your right or turn to your left or turn around and talk to somebody. Or if you could stand up and wave your arms and someone would answer your question. Now in the age of the infectious disease, people are a little reluctant to go into a hotel seating because that chair you were sitting in was somebody else's yesterday and somebody else's the day before that. So there's a reluctance from a percentage of the workforce to return. And we're trying to be sensitive to that. Some people have conditions that make it more dangerous for them to come back in. So I think gradual baby steps is the way that we're looking at it.
Ashli, how about, I'm interested in how BNY Mellon is approaching this, given there's probably a strong New York orientation to this and kind of the challenges that New York has had, or is it market driven rather than a global decision or a headquarters decision?
Yeah, so right now, only our essential workers are going into the office. So that's mostly on the IT side. our CEO and executives, they occasionally go into our office in New York. But to Eric's point, we've also adopted a collaborative space open office model. So very few people have offices. None of our C-suite or CEO has an office anymore. It's literally just an open work environment. And to your point, New York City, they've been hit super hard. Our regions in London, the EMEA region has been hit really hard. Some of our offices in London, Brussels, they see spikes before we do usually. Again, going back to associates in India. So I think that when we talk about equity, it would be kind of regretful if one region was like, okay, you guys are seeing, your vaccinations are going out, you guys can go back to the office, where we have, so many global entities that just, they're not there yet as far as the vaccinations or as far as making sure that the office is a safe place for them to go back to. So right now, the non-essential workers have been told we will not be returning until at least September, but realistically, most of us don't think we're going to go back into the office until 2022, probably the spring, just because the offices were changed so dramatically to go to these collaborative models. So there aren't those cube spaces or anything anymore. So I think the new normal is going to take a little bit of time to engineer.
Sure. Marie, do you have another question?
I do. There was a resource put over there in the chat too, so please check that out in there from David. A great question from Siri, and this is kind of along the lines with what Ashli was talking about, and you'll probably have some insight into this, Ashli. Leading up to the pandemic, the IT industry was really looking to get and expand into metro markets, really getting closer to their clients. How do you think this is going to, the pandemic, remote work is going to affect sort of that expand into city markets and looking at the cost of space and maintenance and new clients and infrastructure?
Well, I think kind of looking at it from like the rosy lens glasses, I think that we have the opportunity to really grow that space in that, they can kind of create their own their home office. For good and bad, you kind of start at your start time and you end whenever you're done with your work. So for some of us, that's a 10-hour day, that's a 12-hour day, that's a 15-hour day sometimes. And I think, a lot of people have found kind of like their comfort zone working from home. So I think it's really an opportunity for those types of opportunities it's an opportunity for those spaces to grow and develop in innovative ways. It may not be what we originally thought it was going to look like, but it can still maybe even be a better model than what we had before when everyone was working from the office.
I like those rose-colored glasses. I think that's great. Anyone else have a comment on that? CGI probably has a wonderful perspective on that as well, especially in your role.
Yeah, I was going to jump in there. It's interesting. So we actually just announced one of our 8th delivery center in Knoxville, Tennessee, just about 3 to 4 weeks ago. So we're anticipating all of the changes that we need to be reacting to from how a workforce uses an office and was an office for in the future, essentially, which is underneath a lot of these questions. But I don't think you'll see us moving away from investing in large metro areas where there's high volumes of talent and technology, as well as what we've been doing since around 2006, which is actually finding pockets of talent in the US in smaller metro areas that haven't typically been tapped into. And in fact, one of the things we're seeing is a lot of our clients are even more open to using that model now because they just went through a whole year of everyone not being on site and where their locations are. And so I think, our intention right now is that demand is going to continue to increase both for the large markets as well as in those smaller cities that we've been making strategic investments into.
That is such a helpful answer too. So sort of both sides of just keeping all of that growing, but just using the strengths of your company, which is great. I think we've exhausted all of the questions in the chat. Do we want to talk about some breakout rooms, Richard?
I think it's time for that. Let's get folks networking, connecting. Those communities are important, as Ashli pointed out to us earlier.
Yes, And that would be great if you want to stick around for just 15 minutes of talking in breakout rooms and just really talking about what other HR practitioners are doing. But I just want to say that this is an amazing start to a much more evolving conversation. And so I just thank all of you for coming. Sincerely thank you to Synergy and CGI and Academy Pittsburgh, Ashli White, Jim Hullinger, who had to leave us, Mandy McManus, William LaBar, and Eric Schmuck. It was our pleasure to be able to listen to all of you today. So thank you so much for giving of your time. Richard Citrin, you are amazing. Thank you so much for being so professional and bringing your personality and guidance to this panel. And for the networking session, Richard actually has some great questions. I'm going to throw them over here in chat. And just if you want to cover these in your breakout rooms, just some guidance there to just get a conversation going. The other thing that I want to add is at the PTC, we do have a Slack channel that a lot of our members use, our HR teams, and I'll put it again here. By clicking on that link, you can just join the Slack channel if you'd like to and post questions, talk about events, be able to reach out to other HR representatives. But with that, I believe that Taylor has our breakout rooms ready. I will say thank you to everybody in the room and keep the conversation going. Taylor will put up a warning when she's going to close breakout rooms and sort of give you 30 seconds to finish up your conversation. But whisk us away, Taylor.